Hello viewers, in this video I shall try to give you a little insight about a short story named Lihav or The Quilt. So this video will be just a brief summary of the short story. That's why please read the original text. Okay, so without any delay, let's begin our discussion. The Quilt, it is a 1942 Urdu short story written by Ismat Chungtai. It was published in the Urdu literary journal Adab-e-Latif, and it led to much controversy at the time, and it has also created uproar and an obscenity trial where Ismat had to defend herself with the Lahore court. Besides, she was also asked to apologize and but she refused it, though she had presented many ill thing of the author's own society, but still no one tried to embrace that. Rather, everyone was against her. Okay, that was the reality. If you try to bring some truth, then people are offended. So that was the little introduction about the short story. Now let's try to know more. The story is told from the point of view of a small girl who is the niece of the protagonist, Begum Jan. And Begum Jan has had a very depressing life after marriage. Her husband, the Nawab, he was much older than her, and he was thought to be extremely respectable for never having had any encounters with prostitutes. But it is soon revealed that it is because his interests lie in the other gender. And the lonely Begum starts to wither but is saved by Rabo, her Messius. And Rabo is a servant girl who is not so pretty but very deft with her hands. And when the narrator is left at Begum Jan's place by her mother, then she has realized that despite her past admiration of love for Begum Jan, there lie many secrets with her. And at night, the great sorrows formed by the quilt of Begum Jan and her odd behavior in the absence of Rabo bring to light their hidden relationship, which has traumatized the narrator. Moreover, the short story The Quilt, it opens with an unnamed first-person narrator commenting on how and when she throws a quilt over herself in winter, and the shadows the quilt makes on the wall appear to sway like an elephant. Then the image evokes a terrifying memory of when the narrator was a little girl and her mother went away for a week, leaving the narrator with the mother's adopted sister, Begum Jan. Afterwards, the mother left the narrator because she was always getting into fights with boys. Then the narrator tells the story of how Begum Jan has an arranged marriage to Nawab Sahib, who was a Muslim nobleman whom the public considers virtuous because no one ever sees dancers and prostitutes visiting his house. However, the Nawab keeps an open house for young male students to live with him while he pays their expenses. Because of the Nawab's implied homosexuality, he ignores his wife's sexual needs and sequesters her to a section of the house. Then she tries in vain to seduce him, but eventually, after finding her life force wasting away, Begum Jan is brought back to life by Rabbu, her hired Messius. Then Rabbu massages Begum Jan constantly. Then she is beside her at all times and even sleeps next to her. Consequently, Begum Jan has a persistent itch that no doctors can cure, and only Rabbu can scratch the itch, and an euphemism for need for sexual release. Then the maids in the household gossip about Begum Jan's dependence on Rabbu, but Begum Jan is completely oblivious, and her existence is centered on her itch only. Okay. The narrator as a child comes to stay with Begum Jan, whom she loves and finds very beautiful. Then Begum Jan is fond of the narrator as well. The narrator sleeps in the same room as Begum Jan and Rabbu. Then she finds Rabbu ugly. Then the narrator wakes up when Begum Jan's quilt shakes. Later in the darkness, the quilt looks like it conceals a struggling elephant. Then the narrator says that Begum Jan's name, and the quilt stops shaking and it deflates. Moreover, Begum Jan tells the narrator to go to sleep. Then the narrator says she is scared, and when she hears a second voice in the room, she says she thinks a thief has come in. But Rabbu, which was the second voice, answered that there was no thief, and in the morning time, the narrator had forgotten about what happened in the night. Then the next day, she heard Rabbu and Begum Jan arguing in subdued tones, and Rabbu cried, and then the narrator heard the slurping sound of a cat licking a plate. The next day, Rabbu left to visit her son, who earlier stayed with the Nawab but ran away after an undisclosed incident. With Rabbu gone, Begum Jan was completely distraught. She won't eat and mop all day, and at night too, the narrator offered to massage her adopted aunt, and Begum Jan lets her do so and accepts the massage while lying quietly. The next day, Rabu still isn't back. Then Begum Jan grows irritable and her head aches. Then the narrator massages her again, and Begum Jan expresses her satisfaction with sensuous breaths. And while chatting about buying things from the market, the narrator barely notices when Begum Jan directs her hand to where Begum Jan itches. Okay. Then the narrator jerks her hand away when she realizes the intimate spot she is touching. Begum Jan then laughs and makes the narrator lie next to her. Then she begins touching the narrator inappropriately, counting her ribs despite the narrator's protest and attempts to wriggle away. Then an intensity builds in Begum Jan's eyes and a scent rises from her body, and a strange fear overcomes the narrator. Begum Jan presses her as though she were an object. But consequently, eventually Begum Jan lies back, breathing heavily. Then the narrator leaves the room and is thankful when Rabu returns that night. Then the narrator continues to stay in Begum Jan's house. She tried to avoid Begum Jan and the nameless terror she felt around her by spending the time with the maids. Begum Jan then made the narrator sit next to her while she washed herself, and the narrator could not look at her body. Begum Jan then tried to offer the reticent narrator a gold necklace and sweets from the market, but the narrator insisted she only wanted to go home. Rabu covertly reprimanded Begum Jan for being so pushy with the narrator, and Begum Jan flied into a fit. That night, Begum Jan had come down in the bedroom too. The narrator noticed Begum Jan's quilt swaying and shaking again. Then she switched on the night the people under the quilt. Begum Jan and Rabu they somersault forward. Then the narrator glimpses under the corner of the quilt. What she sees causes her to gasp, "Good God!" She then sinks deeper into her bed. So in that way it ends. So this was the story of homosexuality, which is a kind of taboo in our society. So that thing the writer has tried to depict. So this is just a little insight. Please read the whole text.